So, for those of you who have been playing the ACA board game at home, this is the ACA podcast. I'm Billy Hoffman.
I'm Steven Smith.
And we're going to go through something in the ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunction, called the laundry list. And so all of the traits that people may develop if they grew up in a dysfunctional home and or alcoholic and or drugs, any kind of shouldn't kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we've made it all the way up to trait 7.
Yes. The most recent one we did was on 5 and 6. So we're highly encourage people, if this is your first one, to go back and listen to the previous ones. And as always, for people who are listening at home, if you want to follow along with what Billy and I are going to be reading and referencing, the laundry list is freely available. If you just Google it, you'll be able to find it. But adultchildren.org is their official website, and they've got a copy on there that people can take a look at as well.
Show you up to try. Yeah, and it's good stuff. You want to start? You start reading start? I'll start with sound. All right.
So the laundry list sign for trait 7 is that we get guilt feelings when we stand up for ourselves instead of giving in to others. Starting with this one, it's a small point, but I often will include, in addition to guilt feelings, shame in this as well. Trait 7, the laundry list, is really about people who struggle with, have a fear of, or a sense of shame whenever they have needs, if they've got wants, or perhaps the need to set a boundary with someone. They really tend to feel very ashamed about having to do that. They probably tend to avoid doing that. I know, often to their own detriment. And where I think some of the laundry list stuff can come from for this one, this may not surprise people. It kind of connects a little bit to some of the other traits that we've talked about in the earlier podcasts. But people who grew up in homes where their needs were either never acknowledged or were very much deemed secondary tends to create this kind of current day reaction. So if I grew up in a home where maybe there's a lot of criticism or like active putting me down, saying don't ask me that, don't bother me,
children are seen and not heard.
Yes, exactly. That mentality, very similar. Or even the variety of this, which is just like, when I had things going on in my life, or if I had a need, people just didn't pay attention. They just cold shouldered, didn't even respond. Can produce that sense of nobody really cares about my needs. But tends to form a belief that, okay, well, maybe my needs just aren't really all that important. In the context of maybe growing up with a caretaker or multiple who have, their own mental health issues or issues with addiction themselves, a lot of times people who relate to trait 7 also will have this sense that, oh, well, my caretaker, my parent, is very fragile. They have so much going on in their lives that every time they're stressed, every time something bad happens for them, they relapse, or they fall into an active addiction period, or they fall into a depressive episode. Sometimes children say, well, I got to make sure clearly what I have going on at school is not nearly as important as what's going on with mom or dad. And so they start to develop this sense that, so they're afraid. Yes, they don't want to make the thing happen for mom and dad, but they also believe that, they come to really hold this belief that my needs are secondary to other people's. And when you have such a deeply held belief like that, when I start to have those actual pretty normal human wants and needs in adulthood, I feel ashamed. I feel like I don't deserve to have it.
And the dark side of that, you started to allude it in the beginning of what you were speaking about there, but the dark side is maybe I grew up in a household where if I asked for things, it was met with anger. Maybe I'm afraid to ask for things, not just because I'm afraid that, it might make mom or dad relapse, but they might come at me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they might get like, how could you be so entitled to ask for that? Or, putting people down for even asking in the first place, that angry over the top reaction, that they may be doing the guilting in some way.
Right, that's right.
Which, actually, I think kind of connects to the other laundry list, because, that's kind of what the other laundry list for this trait says, which is we make others feel guilty when they attempt to assert themselves. So that could look like a parent, actively guilting me. Maybe I ask for something and maybe one of my parents is like, oh, I'm such a bad parent that I can't give this to you. I'm so horrible. They start to put on some of that, they're so ashamed of themselves that it starts to guilt me for I shouldn't have even asked in the first place. If people relate to the other laundry list side, though, they may find that they are doing some of the same things in their adulthood. They may find that they sometimes make others feel guilty for attempting to assert themselves. They might not do so well when someone asserts a boundary with them. They might feel like, oh, this person's rejecting me. I shouldn't have asked in the first place. Can kind of get a little aggressive with other people in that way.
So I can tell you the experience side for me was I would, oh, there are the glasses. I would, the experience side, we get guilt feelings when we stand up for ourselves instead of giving in to others. Yeah, I cared so much about what everyone else thought, how it might affect them, that I would often, get those guilt feelings during the times that I was in active addiction, but maybe not as active. That would come up in early recovery. It came up a lot. Now, when I was in full blown addiction, I might have felt guilty at times, but I had so many other things going on. I didn't have time to think about it. So that's how I experienced that side of the laundry list.
Did you ever have the experience of having feelings and kind of wanting to display them to people or wanting to ask for things in your childhood? And if you did those, how would people around you respond?
Well, with my mother was always open to me saying things. The downside is we were broke, right? There wasn't a lot of money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we were able to get, say, nice things. So for instance, when I was growing up, my Atari Christmas, say, was probably a year or so after all my friends had one, right? Nike tennis shoes. And this is back when really that you can only really get like white with a blue stripe or maybe canvas white with a blue stripe. That's all there was.
Yeah.
But they were expensive.
Sure.
For the early 80s. And so she would hear it, but she would often, of course say, well, we don't have the money for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't afford this, that, or whatever. By that time, my father was already gone, and then I was fearing some other man that was in my house.
Sure. Other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think that there's a lot of, I kind of tossed out a few different options for trait 7. There are many others. There's lots of different paths that can get us to arrive at a place in adulthood where I feel like what I've got going on in here, it sort of doesn't matter or shouldn't matter to other people. And yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter. Someone maybe in childhood grew up broke and, the reality is maybe that they couldn't afford things. But sometimes people can still grow up feeling ashamed for asking for things.
Oh, yeah.
Even when there is more actually available to them in adulthood. So it could be a tough one to keep tabs on. I think trait 7 is a little bit like trait 6, which we talked about in the last podcast, in that people have an easier time admitting when I think, oh, I don't like to put my needs forward. I don't like to put this on anyone else. But part of what trait 7's laundry list also protects us from is I may feel ashamed if I have to stand up for myself. But what it also does is by not ever standing up for what I need, it basically guarantees that I never get put in the position to be rejected in some way. So it is kind of a protective measure, as much as it is kind of a reaction to what we went through.
And there can also be like a passive aggressive side to this where it also creates resentments. I can't ask for these things. I feel guilty, but I'm also upset
that other people aren't seeing it because I can't ask for it, but I expect other people to be able to see past it and acknowledge my
yes.
And in many cases where I'd say where that dynamic does emerge, oftentimes that person had a caretaker who did the same thing And their role as a kid was that they had to anticipate their parents' needs. And so that's what they believe people are supposed to do around them, is that like they're supposed to see my needs. I shouldn't have to, actually be vulnerable and ask her what I need. Other people should just know it. I think that's a great observation. That one definitely could show up with Trick Sound.
So the other side of this laundry list says, we make others feel guilty when they attempt to assert themselves. What's that all about?
Yeah, I think that this is just really the flip side of the coin, where like people in adulthood find themselves replicating the behavior that they saw someone else steal. So let's say I had a parent who would kind of, in order to get their needs met or in order to push away requests, would sort of make others feel guilty or shame. Maybe it's the put down, it's the criticism, or the passive aggressive example that you just gave. That probably was hurtful to me in some way. But as I've said in a lot of these podcasts, that kind of plants a little bit of a seed that like adults can do that. So people, they find themselves replicating on some occasions those behaviors, a lot of times in their close romantic relationships. So I think actually the example you just shared about like with the resentment example is the other laundry list side. It's I am sort of making passive aggressive comments to my partner. Oh, how come they never pay attention to what I need or want? It shouldn't have to be on me to actually say what I need. And when people have told me that, sometimes I say like, yeah, I think it's a kind thing to do for people to be conscientious and to try to anticipate people's needs. But, in terms of what we all have control over, it is kind of actually on us, right, to communicate what we need. And so when people are trying to get that need met through guilting others or, maybe criticizing them into giving them what they need, those are examples of the other laundry list side, which are unfortunate because I'd say paradoxically, with people trying to get their needs met by guilting others, it usually does not get them what they really want.
Oh, no, yeah, certainly not in the long run.
No, definitely not. So this one working through that really is about changing those interpersonal patterns in order to be more assertive in like a healthy way, in order to get, the love, affirmation and the validation needs that maybe we actually do have, instead of making others feel guilty to do that.
It's hard to believe that we are officially halfway
Yes.
through the laundry list.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 7 is the halfway point.
Yeah, there's a lot to this stuff. And we probably could even spend more time in these tricks. We're just going through them to get people a taste of. I'm curious to have you recreate and hear kind of a bit more about your experiences with it as well.
Okay. So the laundry list in trait 8, we became addicted to excitement. So I always wanted to have something going on, I whether it was video games growing up or, we used to go out on our bikes and build ramps and jump ramps and things like that. But always had to be doing something, and I've learned over time that some of that comes from, the uncertainty and everything else that was going on growing. Part of it is I'm being a kid. Part of it was some other things. I'm using it to escape, maybe that kind of thing. But certainly when I got into my addiction phase, I couldn't get enough excitement. I wanted all excitement all the time.
Sure.
And I would go from thing to thing to thing to get it.
Yeah. When you were in those periods, like if someone could have sort of physically stopped you from getting the excitement that you were generating there, but what do you imagine that you would have been feeling instead of those moments?
I'm at the time I would be resentful.
Yeah.
For being stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking me, did I have some kind of feeling going on that I'm not sure that I would have always recognized it. truly. You know, I mean, some of the things just felt like things that I like to do, and like, yeah, I couldn't get enough of it. Yeah. I don't know that I would have known the exact feeling back then. Now I do know with, say, relationships, right? You know, there were times I'm super depressed and sad about relationships, those kinds of feelings that the excitement helped with that.
Yeah.
But in those moments, sometimes the excitement wasn't enough. I mean, a broken relationship could put me down,
Sure.
but that was about the only thing that could.
That could outweigh that. You sure? Yeah, no, I appreciate sharing about that. Trait 8 is so broad. There's so many different things that I think we could talk about with this. I mean, and you've already talked about a few, which is like, one, and I think this is what a lot of times people will think of first when they are becoming addicted to excitement, is that am I using excitement to escape other more negative feelings? Whether they're depressive feelings, whether they are, low self-esteem, low self-worth, or whether they're like uncertainty, anxiety, fear. I would rather feel excited, sort of engrossed in whatever adrenaline that I might have been seeking elsewhere. I'd rather feel that than this other stuff. And certainly, I think a lot of people who have that addiction to excitement probably can relate to that on some occasions. But I think you're also getting at something which is like, doesn't necessarily always have to be that. Because there's a degree to which some of this stuff is just exciting and it's fun.
That's right.
And because it's so fun, our brain, it just says more. I want more. I want more of this good thing.
And I would stack things on top of things.
Sure.
I just could never get high enough.
Yes.
With the excitement piece.
Yeah. It starts to have that feeling of like, I'm chasing that in some way, which, of course, is kind of where some of the wheels start to come off in the long run, because when it starts to feel like it's never enough, like there comes a point where you can't get any more excitement.
Yeah, that's right.
Or if you do, like, there's going to be just sort of physical consequences.
That's right.
That'll stop you from getting to that. That's true. I also think about this too, that like if I grew up in a household where there was just like so much, chaos, whether it was excitement, like I saw someone else in my own kind of always being adrenaline seeking and excitement seeking, or just like, turmoil, dramatic scenes, uncertainty, dysfunction. I also just may not really have a template that could show me, hey, it's okay to feel excited in life, but sometimes we have to find ways to like bring ourselves back down to even keel and calm. If I just am not accustomed to seeing people ever come back down to even keel, no one ever taught me how to do that. I don't really know how to regulate my own internal state. I just think excitement is sort of the natural state of being that put my baseline all the way up here, and then I just go seeking even more than that when I want more. I think that kind of dynamic can become in play with this. A lot of moving to the flip side of the laundry list with this is about, I think, getting more in touch with our internal state. So like, am I seeking excitement? Am I trying to escape something? What are the ways that I can stop myself from seeking so much excitement? How can I helpfully bring myself back down to neutral, to calm, to peaceful? If I even know what those feelings are, I might need to learn how to discover those. I'm actually curious for you in your recovery journey, did it take some time for you to kind of establish a comfort with the idea of like stability?
Oh yeah. I tell the story to people all the time. Early meeting with my first sponsor, he said, what you need is some balance. And balance just offended me. I was like,
Offensive.
that offends me, yeah, because my identity was wild, crazy, up-tempo guy, drive for the party, kind of I gamble all the time guy. And he's like, no, what you need is balance. And so that just seemed, that equaled boring to me.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think that, when excitement becomes a feature of our identity, what people often describe as boring is just a synonym for like stability, balance, calmness. And it takes some time to get used to that and maybe even let go of that sense of my identity is wrapped up in being.
Oh, right. Right. And you mentioned to me early before we started the podcast how when we do the ACA groups and we have compulsive gamblers in them, that they will often respond in a big way to this trait, addicted to excitement. And yeah, and I've seen that, and I was that, and they'll often call gambling disorder, gambling addiction, the disease of more. No, it's always about more excitement, more money, more, and it's hard for people, which is why, and the early stages of all of it, slowing people down is like the most important thing.
Yeah.
Slow down. Let's not have to have all of this excitement all the time. And even every now and then, people will ask me, well, do I want to find something else that's exciting that replaces this other thing that was exact? No, not exactly. We just need to slow down.
Yeah.
But if they're being influenced by some of these things that ACA points out, there's even more to dig up and look for.
Sure. So the other side or the other laundry list for trait A is we inhibit our fear by staying dead end and numb. So again, flip side of the coin to excitement. Rather than being addicted to excitement, we kind of inhibit the fear by staying numb, dead end, withdrawn, you name it. And so I think about this one. This one often is a response to the chaos, the dysfunction. So with the laundry list side, I may have just sort of learned to live in that chaos. Maybe I fed off it. Maybe the chaos became excitement for me, and that's where I would kind of live in. The den and none side is like, I felt like I had no ability to control anything. This felt unstable. This felt uncertain. This created a sense of fear for me. And because I couldn't stand that, I sort of adapted by just learning to live in a state of dissociation and no less. I would, maybe acutely shut down and just sort of like be by myself off in my own little dream world where none of this was real. This sometimes can feel or look a lot like depression. It may have just become a sense of, I don't think about what I'm feeling. I don't notice how I'm feeling. I just sort of exist and I just sort of go through the motions of life. But they're all adaptations to basically the same chaos, excitement, dysfunction within the household. I'm going to shut down so that I don't have to live in that reality that I'm experiencing.
And what this reminds me of, if you remember the character Eeyore, how you doing? Fine, I guess. It's just always so flat, and but I have met people like this. I have met people who went the other way and just and it takes a long time to help someone get out of that.
Yeah, it's like all of this stuff is kind of like a reflex. It's a muscle memory thing, an emotional muscle memory that we kind of form, whatever traits people find that they're relating to. But yeah, when I spend pretty much my whole childhood or early life learning that the best way for me to get by is by disconnecting from myself, when someone comes along in adulthood and says, hey, maybe you should consider getting a little more connected, a lot of times people aren't going to really feel a desire to do that. It might just feel like, why would I do that? I don't even know what you're referring to when you say get connected to myself. It might be met with a sense of trepidation, like, no, I don't want to do that, because if I do that, like, who knows what I'm going to feel. The challenge with the trait A of the laundry list side is that usually the things that might motivate a person to want to change from that or want to try to understand why they do that is usually if, one, part of how they inhibit their fear by saying dead and numb, if part of how they do that is their addictive behavior, then they might think, okay, well, if I'm drinking all the time to inhibit my fear, then I probably need to do something about it if I want to stop drinking. Or people in my life and my relationships tell me that I'm never emotionally present for them. Never there. And it's like they tell me that they think I don't care about them. When that's not true, that I actually do care about them. I just don't know I just don't know to say it exactly. Or even, I don't even know what's going on with me. So how am I supposed to tell them something that I don't know? A lot of times people who are related to the other laundry lists will have other people in their life who they feel like try to sort of pull things out of them. Yeah, but someone's always saying, hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? And they're like, why are people always asking that? It's like, well, because they're picking up on things that maybe this person is actively not feeling or denying someone.
And I see you a lot, and you don't share much.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, when people begin to wonder like what goes on in there. So it's tough, I think, working through either side of trait 8. Trait 8 to me, almost like I think about it as like if balance, calmness, stability somewhere in the middle. The laundry list side looks at people who tend to run to the elevated excitement, chasing all the dopamine rush and everything up here. And then the other laundry list side talks about people who say, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm going to live my life in the shutdown. And sometimes people, we've worked with plenty of them who actually relate to both. And they say, I find myself kind of going from one extreme to the other. Mm-hmm. I'm living in the excitement, but eventually that runs out of gas. I can't keep doing that. And then it's almost like I crash down into numbness. I can't bear it.
Which is below baseline.
Exactly.
And so I go from above to below.
Yep. And then sometimes I get so sick of being in the nothing and the knownness that I just want to try to feel alive in some way. Oh, I want to feel alive. Let's go chase some excitement again. And it's like a really tough cycle that people go to. It takes some real dedicated work for people to recognize what are the ways that aren't just addictive behaviors that I can learn to manage or sort of modulate my mood and my internal state to get me to excitement without or giving back to balance without blasting through the roof to excitement.
And that's exactly why I like to fish, Steve. Because when I go fishing, I have that balance. There's a period of time where there's nothing going on.
Yep.
And then there's a little bit of excitement when you catch one.
I've not actually thought about the excitement piece of that. It's a little bit of both. It's just a little bit, but there's actually a lot of balance that comes with it.
That's right. And so we are officially over halfway through the laundry list traits. In review of some things we've said in the past, if you grew up, in a dysfunctional home, look into ACA, learn more about the laundry list. If you're a therapist, go to an open ACA meeting, become ACA informed. What else could we tell them that's necessary?
I just think if you're also someone who maybe already sees a therapist or already is going to recovery meetings, it's never a bad place to start talking about this stuff too, even if you don't take the first step immediately to get to an ACA meeting or don't read all the literature. Just be willing to say, hey, I heard this podcast or I read this laundry list, got me thinking a little bit, and just start sharing about it. That's always a good place to start with this stuff too.
So there are 14 total, and we're going to go through them all. This is the ACA podcast, and we'll see you next time.